An 8-year-old squirrel, rescued as an infant, refuses to leave the man who saved her, returning to his home every day for food and comfort. Settle in for their journey. If you believe in the power of these stories, a simple like helps our channel immensely. Now let us enter their world. The story begins not with a grand journey, but in a small, quiet space where a man named John was simply trying to keep a tiny thing alive. He was a man of routine, a carpenter whose hands were accustomed to shaping wood, not caring for the fragile life of a newborn squirrel. She was barely furred, a creature of pink skin and nervous energy, found abandoned after a storm. John named her Bella. He didn't intend to keep her. The goal was to nurse her back to health, to teach her what she needed to know, and then to release her back into the vibrant, chaotic world she belonged to. He knew the rules of wildlife rescue. You don't domesticate the wild. But Bella, it seemed, had her own set of rules. She grew not in a cage, but in the safe, quiet warmth of John's workshop. She learned to climb his shoulders and to chatter at the neighbor's cat. When she was strong enough, John took her to the garden. He watched her bound toward the trees, a small, triumphant flicker of gray against the green. He felt the satisfying, bittersweet pang of a job completed. The wild had claimed her back. John went inside, ready to close that chapter. But less than an hour later, a small, insistent scratching came from the screen door. He opened it, and there she was. Bella, head cocked, eyes gleaming, as if she was simply checking in before going about her day. The wild may have called to her, but her home, her sanctuary, was here. The morning ritual began the next day, and the day after that, and the week after that. Bella would leave before dawn, answering the irresistible call of the forest. She would forage, she would climb, and she would live the life of a truly wild squirrel. But every single day, without fail, she would return. She didn't return just for the food, though John always had a hazelnut waiting. She returned for the connection, for the comfort of a space where she was known and loved. The neighbors were astonished. They would see Bella racing across the telephone lines, a streak of untamed energy, only to watch her pause at John's back porch, transforming into a relaxed, almost serene house pet. This daily return wasn't a dependency. It was an act of choice. Bella was thriving in the wild. She was alert, agile, and fiercely independent. But she chose John. She chose the 5 minutes of quiet, shared space, often spent sitting on his knee while he sipped coffee or curled up in the pocket of his shirt before darting off again. This routine became their shared language, a silent, profound conversation that transcended the boundaries of species. John would say that their bond wasn't about ownership or even rescue anymore. It was about respect. He never tried to hold her back. He never caged her. He simply showed up every morning, honoring her freedom while offering unconditional sanctuary. The years passed, and this beautiful, baffling routine continued. Squirrels in the wild typically live only a few years, but Bella was exceptional. She entered her 3rd year, her 5th, and then her 8th. 8 years is an eternity in the life of a squirrel, and every one of those years, Bella came home. She had raised her own families in the nearby woods, her offspring scattering to live their own wild lives, but she, the matriarch, always returned to her first human. The test of their bond came during a particularly brutal winter. The snow was heavy and relentless. Days went by, and for the first time in years, Bella did not appear. John felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He told himself she was simply hunkered down, safe in a deep nest, but the silence of the porch felt deafening. He left food out every morning, a small offering against the vast white landscape, hoping against hope that she would see it. Weeks turned into a month. John was forced to accept the brutal truth that comes with loving a wild thing. Sometimes they simply don't return. Then, one bitterly cold afternoon, he heard it, a faint, familiar scratching at the glass. He opened the door, and there she was, slightly thinner, eyes a little tired, but undeniably Bella. She didn't race in for the food. She simply walked onto his knee and sat there for a long time, the familiar warmth of his body her only need. It wasn't a confrontation with nature, but a surrender to trust. She had weathered the worst of the storm, and her first thought, her deepest instinct, was not to find a new shelter, but to find him. It was in that moment that John realized the full, profound weight of their relationship. From that winter onward, the bond settled into an unbreakable rhythm. Bella continued to live out in the wild, but her daily visit became a certainty, a gravitational pull that time and distance could not diminish. She became the constant in John's life, a tiny, furry anchor that reminded him of the simple, potent truth of loyalty. The beauty of their final years together wasn't in any dramatic rescue or heroic feat, but in the quiet consistency of their relationship. John would sit on the porch, and a minute later, Bella would appear, a tiny gray shadow against the green lawn. They would share a moment of perfect, effortless communion. Two different species, two different worlds, united by a simple, profound history. Their story isn't about defying nature. It's about defining family. It reminds us that devotion doesn't require a shared language or even a shared species. All it requires is an open heart, the willingness to show up, and the deep, silent promise that no matter how wild the world gets, you will always have a place to come home to. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Before you scroll away, tell me this. Do you believe a bond like theirs could really exist? If this story touched your heart, drop a 1 in the comments so I know you're still with me. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might just remind you that sometimes the wild loves us back in ways we'll never forget.